Kick-hank. Well, that was rough. Hey, look, I got rid of it. I did it. Guys, welcome back to Pencil to Pencil Live, LIVE. If you see Pencil to Pencil on your video scope, that means it must be Wednesday somewhere. And it must be 8 p.m. EST somewhere. We are here. I would love to welcome you to the show. If this is your first time watching, there's a thing I do. I say, well, hello. Guys, my name is Jamar Nicholas. I'm your first host. If you have never seen my smiling angelic countenance before, I am a cartoonist in good standing. I am a board member of the National Cartoonist Society and also the Philadelphia chapter chair. I have a book series at Scholastic. Leon the Extraordinary is on sale as we speak. The next book in the series, Leon Worst Friends Forever, will be in stores October 1st. Pre-order it, why don't you? Guys, I would be remiss if I did not introduce one of the co-hosts, cohorts, and co-conspirators of Pencil to Pencil. He is known in these internet streets as, well, he doesn't need to hold the belt like Hulk Hogan doesn't need the belt to be the champion. That's right. Tell them who you are, Stone Cold Steve Conley. Hello.
Hello, guys. It's so good to see you. I like the co-host. It's getting faster. Coast. It's gonna be the coast.
Yeah, co-host, coast to coast. I love it.
I am the fourth host of Pencil to Pencil. My name is Steve Conley. I write and draw the webcomic The Middle Age, which you can read at middleagecomic.com. It's at Go Comics and Webtoons and Tapas, and you can read it at middleagecomic.com. And if you roll dice, if you play the TT RPGs, the tabletops and the role-playing games,
the dungeons or dragons,
you like your Dungeons and your Dragons, you can pick up Intoximancy or any of the RPG books I've made.
Wow.
But I would be remiss if I didn't introduce the Tower Power, the man of the hour, too sweet to be sour, the marvel of mark making, Maestro, Mr. Mike Manley.
Hello, everyone.
Well, hello, Mike Manley.
I'm Mike Manley, and I'm celebrating Jack Kirby's birthday today.
Nice. Wow, look at that. It's hold on, let me put that on the screen. Mike and the King.
Wow.
I love it.
Wow.
Mike, what year was that?
1983, I think.
Oh man, slowly.
1983.
Slowly I turned, step by step.
I met him twice. Once there in the Chicago convention, and then a couple years later, very briefly in San Diego. So today is Jack Kirby's birthday, and without Jack Kirby, there probably would be no comic books.
Yeah, word up.
Yeah, there probably wouldn't. I don't know whether I would be doing comic books without it.
So, Mike, before we get away from it, tell this room full of people what you do, if they're not so sure.
I draw comic books. I've been drawing comic books for 40 years. This summer is my 40th anniversary of working in this crazy biz, and I've done work for Marvel and DC, worked in animation doing storyboards, character design, background design. I've had a very interesting and fun career.
I love it.
And right now I'm doing about to turn in, as soon as we're done with this, I will be turning in this week's Phantom comic strips.
The Phantom, like the purple in like hazard stripe shorts Phantom.
Yeah,
like
the guy who has, you don't have to see, it's easy not to see the stains if you put stripes on your pants.
They're slimming.
Don't give away all the secrets.
Jungle slimming.
I love it.
Nothing like it. This is the best way to lose weight is to completely cover your body in a leotard and run around in the middle of the African heat.
Oh, I love it.
It's very svelte.
I know it keeps us. I think the stripes are very slimming. Well, you guys, I have to address the reason we're here tonight, and I think we have a box office record tonight for live attendance in the chat room. What we do here is, and this is a sister project of Mike Manley, that guy down here. Back in the day, we used to do a magazine called Draw! Exclamation Point. Remember magazines? Remember that?
Remember people used to say that.
Remember people used to read like with their eyeballs in printed matter. Mike ran a magazine where we kind of went over all of the behind the scenes how-tos and professional scuttlebutt of being a professional cartoonist, animator, and people that stripe. And since we're in a modern age, we've decided to turn it into a video show. So we were podcasting before this. This is now turned into like a live streaming thing. And we really want to thank you for your eyeballs and attention tonight. Our guest tonight, Steve Purcell, almost needs no introduction, but we interviewed him in the magazine some time ago. And I'm very excited to have him back here. I'm not going to bring it in just yet, Steve. I just want to do one more thing before we get started, so you have a second. Before I go on, I wanted to share something with you guys. I kind of had like a road trip at the end of last week, and I hope I can share that. As I just mentioned that I am in the National Cartoon Society. If you've never heard of the National Cartoon Society, just imagine all those old guys in Connecticut in the black and white times with suits on and cigars drawing giant-headed cartoons of all the favorite things you used to read in the paper.
Oh, you mean the millionaires?
Yeah, those guys with golf carts and all that kind of stuff. That society still exists. And even though some of the faces have changed, the mission is still the same, to celebrate cartooning in every stripe. So I'm very happy that I am a member. Also, everybody on the screen is a member. And for me to be a part of the NCS as a graphic novelist, I think is, worth talking about. But I wanted to share real quick a couple of things from my visit in La Jolla, California last weekend. Oh no, it's not popping up. All right, well, you guys are lucky it's not there. But what I wanted to show you was from our archives, and I just put on my Facebook earlier today, that a bunch of people who won division awards were also guests on Pencil to Pencil. So Tahid Bondia, who is the fantastic cartoonist behind Crabgrass in your local paper, won Best Comic Strip of the Year. So that's fantastic. Congratulations to Tahid. Also, our good buddy Chuck Dillon brought home 2 division awards last weekend, which is also great. Go back and watch Chuck's interview. And also Jim Borgman, who I interviewed in Draw Magazine and had him on the show a while back. I don't think they won anything, but it was great meeting Jim and Jerry Scott, the Zitz guys. And we're going to have the Zitz guys on the show very soon. So just think about the richness you get from being a part of the Pencil to Pencil universe. So I think I'm going to not waste any more time, because all these people here are here to see Steve Purcell. If you are not familiar with Sam and Max, which is kind of like one of the seminal creator-owned properties in entertainment, one of the things that I love about Steve, besides his style and his cartooning chops, is that Sam and Max has almost touched every different column of media at this point. There are people that know Sam and Max from comic books. There are people that know Sam and Max from video games. People know the cartoon, and on and on and on. And there's even a new iteration of the video game. So that's just one facet of what Steve does. So I'm so excited to bring him in here. Let me get you ready for rendering, Steve. Get ready for beaming up. Welcome to Pencil to Pencil, our good buddy Steve Purcell. You've been rendered. Hey, hello. Hey, thanks so much for hanging out in the background, Steve. I hope you didn't fall asleep. So one more rule of the road before we get started. So guys, in the chat, you guys are buzzing. I'm very excited that you're here. Please ask a question. Because of the volume of people in here, I cannot guarantee that it will get on the screen. What's going to happen is the 4 of us are going to have a nice shop talk, and if I can sew your question into what we're talking about, and if we have time to end for lightning round, we're going to do that. So
and no tuned. Flash photography.
That's right. So yeah, Steve, thanks so much for joining us. And you're on the West Coast in some sort. That's correct. how are you doing as far as travel these days? Now I know we in the green room we were talking about comic book conventions and stuff. Do you still keep a convention schedule, or have you limited that over the years?
I would actually rarely go to shows. The last one I went to was San Diego before the pandemic, and the pandemic, when that put a stop to San Diego, my older son and I would, for a few years we would drive down and make the week of it and share the table with the Mignolas and with Jeff Darrow and Frank Cho and those guys. And once the pandemic hit, and I didn't do it for a couple of years, then it was when the time came for it to start up again. Christine Mignola said, "Are you interested in coming back to the table?" And I was thinking, oh, maybe this is a good time to kind of just check out for now. Maybe I would go back and do it again someday, but it felt like that sort of rhythm had been broken, and so it felt like I wasn't eager to just jump back in right away.
Yeah, it is kind of like a double Dutch thing. It's like, once you're in that momentum and you do a show, then you do another show, and then you book another show. But if you kind of pull out of it, it's hard to want to go.
Yeah, and there was all the run up of, I got to do a new shirt this year, which I actually would enjoy, sort of coming up with a new Sam and Max shirt every year. So there'd be something new on the table, and then just, loading up the car and me and my son driving down and bonding for the week and going out to, dinners in San Diego and stuff like that. And he would put on his Spider-Man costume and roam around the hall and come back and check in with me during the day.
Now, I think
you watch the table while I go to the bathroom, please.
That's such an important pro tip, that you need a table buddy. It's hard to move around, especially at San Diego if it's just you.
Well, as soon as I'd walk away from the table, I'd start getting texts from him. Dad, there's somebody here who wants to talk to you. Oh, there's somebody here who wants to buy something.
Right. Tell them I'll be right there. Don't leave. That's one of my favorite things, the phantom buyer. Like, you get back from wherever you were, and the guy next to you is like, "Oh my God, you just missed it. This guy just threw $1,000 on the table, but took it back because you weren't here."
Gene Simmons just came by and brought his checkbook.
Yeah, in costume.
Right. You miss all of it.
That's what he does.
Yeah.
So, and to that, like, what was the last, and maybe I missed this, when was the last San Diego Comic-Con you attended?
So whatever the one before they closed it for the pandemic, so I couldn't tell you what the year
2019.
Right.
Was it?
2019, yeah.
That's not that far back,
Yeah.
5 years.
Yeah, that's not too bad. One thing that was really interesting about going back after the pandemic, that it kind of forced the show to slow down a little bit, which I kind of enjoyed. What was it like? I would, last time it was 2022, and that was before 23 when the writer's strike happened, and people had a really good year when the writer's strike happened, because there was more comics and less, noise in another fashion.
Wasn't there one year wasn't there one at Thanksgiving weekend or something?
I think so.
Mini one,
like a mini
off year.
Well, have you traveled at all to, if you were a guest of the show, like how far would you come to New York, or do you keep a
if somebody wanted to send me somewhere, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. So sometimes I get invited to talk about like video games or something in another country, and it's like, well, let me think about that. And if there's a reason to go to the place where they're having the thing, like, I don't want to just go and sit in a hall and
right,
not really have time to visit the place, and so I fielded a couple of those offers and politely declined, just because I'm not highly motivated to go to talks at this point.
Well, yeah, we had Dan Parent. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Steve.
No, I just haven't cultivated that as part of my, business plan. Being a speaker at different events. It's not something that, has emerged out of my career so far.
Yeah, it really is a different thing. Just talking to different cartoonists over the years, and they're kind of what we call weekend warriors. Like, every Saturday and Sunday, they're at a different show somewhere.
One year, actually, San Diego invited me to be a guest, and it was funny because I was so used to going by myself and sort of handling things myself. I didn't know enough to let them pick me up at the airport and stuff. I just got my own transportation into the show, and I went and stood in the line for my badge, and I just didn't know how to be taken care of.
Yeah, you know,
What are you trying to help me for?
No, please give me your satchel. No, it's mine. Where you going? You can't have it. No, that's something you kind of have to work your way through. So, if I can do one thing, Steve, before I eat up all the time, again, I don't really want to go into your origin story. It's something that we usually do with a lot of our guests. But I'm super interested in how, like, if you could start with the genesis of how Sam and Max came to be, because I know you've been in the system for a while, and I don't mean that it's not like that's not like an old jab.
Sounds like the Matrix or something.
But it's like when I first recall hearing about Sam and Max, Fish Police was out. Yeah. You know what I mean? And you know, we're going back. That's kind of like the mid '80s. Is that kind of when Sam and Max kind of hit print?
Yeah, the first one I believe was '87. I want to say.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But yeah, Steve Moncouse had had some pretty good success self-publishing Fish Police, and I can't remember. He must have known the Sam and Max strips that I had done in my school paper and that stuff, because he pitched me the idea of, hey, we're thinking of doing a second title. Do you want to do a Sam and Max book? And I I'd only done the characters in the school strips. I was on the newspaper class, and so I would turn one in every week, and so I would kind of cobble it together quickly the night before it was due, and I didn't really spend any time doing it. It was my doodly style.
Right.
And when it came time to actually do the book, it's like, oh, what does a Sam and Max comic book look like? Like what if I never get another chance to do one of these? Maybe I should spend some time and figure out what it looks like. And I can't remember if I contrived 4 months or if it just took me 4 months, but somehow I ended up spending 4 months doing that book, thinking maybe I'll never do another comic, and so I'll just do as nice a job as I can on this one and do it the way I want, have activity pages and silly things that I like in comics.
And that turned into like one of the benchmarks for the humor in the strip, is that you were doing all this kind of extra esoteric stuff that people fell in love with.
And part of them is being self-referential, and I told the story of how my kid brother and I used to draw our own comics when we were kids. We'd like staple some paper together, and then you just fill up that amount of paper with comics. And he was the first one to do a dog and a rabbit that were detectives, and then he would leave the books laying around the house, his ones that weren't finished. And so I'd go and find it, and I'd finish his drawings, and I'd make fun of the way he drew, and I'd put the thumb on the wrong side of the hand, and then make the characters forget each other's names and stuff. And so their kind of style of this, they kind of proclaim all their dialogue, and that kind of came out of the idea of making fun of the comics of a little kid. Actually, I brought the first Sam and Max comic.
Oh, we would love to see that. Hold on, I'm going to give you the whole screen.
Let's see.
What the?
I've got a glare coming in from.
Oh yeah, that's your godlight right there. That's wow.
So that's his cover. He drew this. Man, he didn't draw anything else. And so he drew the eyeball, and then I drew Max's face around it and started. Right. Max was turned into a cyclops by the evil Dr. Mitzvah. And then
oh wow.
Hi folks, I'm all better. And then here's the both of them. Now they're drawn completely different on this page. And come on, Max, let's get the robbers. Yeah, Sam, they took the Zoobadoop diamonds. So it's basically the dialogue of a kid. And so this is a case where Sam's hand is drawn the wrong way.
Oh, look at that. That's fantastic.
There go the thieves now. It's the Sun Boys, Sam. Sorry, I've got this glare coming in my back window.
Oh, there you go.
Get them, Max. Oh, it's the Sun Boys. Max, I mean Sam. Get them, Max, I mean Max.
Now, is your brother older than you?
He's younger. By a few years.
So were you guys challenging each other in a way?
Not at all. We were both sort of in our own little zones, and we would just do what we thought was fun. And for whatever reason, I felt like teasing him, giving him a hard time. So they catch the bad guys. Where is it? And then they beat their heads in with hammers.
Nice.
You said it, Max. Crime doesn't pay. So, and then we'd always have extra pages at the end. It's hard to see. So we would say, and this is the end. This is really the end. So,
oh my goodness,
if you were out there selling ads.
If you didn't have enough juice for the whole another story, you just end the keep ending it perpetually.
Steve, Ritzis asks, from what year is that? What year are those?
Oh boy,
from?
I love that it's issue 27.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, and I don't even think he got that high when he was numbering them, but it must have been had to be in the 70s sometime. Early 70s maybe.
That's fantastic. So about that point when you were asked to kind of create this comic, do you remember how many pages that first story was?
I think it was 32 pages. That number jumps out for some reason, so I just have that number floating in my head, like maybe that's it. Maybe somebody has one at home and they can count the pages, but yeah, and so I remember breaking it down in thumbnails, and the lettering was all written out on like lined paper, handwritten out, and given to my letterer Lois Buhalis, who hand lettered it on the pages, which was really exciting. The first time I saw one of my pages come back with professional lettering on it before it was inked, it's like, oh, what's this?
So, but did Lois start kind of after your first issue, or like right at the beginning, Lois was with you?
That was, that was the first published book, and so I can't remember how we connected as far as putting her on the project. I guess I knew her because she had gone with me and Mike Mignola to our first San Diego Comic Con, which was in '82. So we all drove down in my '66 Barracuda and drove all night so we could save $60 on the Pickwick Hotel. But Lois was in the car with us, so I must have known her through our group of San Francisco friends, and so it became obvious that she was the one that's going to letter that stuff.
And Lois lettered your work for a while, didn't she?
Yeah, anything that was published. I don't know that there were any jobs that were published that she didn't letter of Sam and Max. There were a few things where, when I did my short-lived web strip, I just found a font which I think might have been poached from their style, Tom and Lois, and just kind of would slug it in digitally, but anything that was hand lettered on the comics pages was her.
I think she lettered some stuff I did for DC. I think she lettered some of the Superman stuff I did.
Yeah, she and Tom were really good.
What were your style influences? I look at it, and the independent comics were so much fun in the 80s and 90s, like the self-published and smaller publishers. Who were your influences? Because was it comic strips? Was it Warner Brothers? Was it, because it didn't feel like Marvel and DC.
Oh no, I had done some Marvel books, which I call, I had a little bit of a career doing some of that stuff, and I call those books unremarkable. But the stuff that I was influenced by for my own stuff was Mad Magazine. It was Mad Magazine all day long. It was Mark Drucker, and it was Al Jaffe, and Jack Davis, and those are the guys that I, while other people were more caught up in the Marvel books as kids, I was looking at stuff that was funny. That was the stuff that spoke to me. And so when it came time to draw something that was in my own style, that was the stuff that came out. When I was doing the Marvel stuff, I was trying to do a Marvel style or do a straight
Right.
straight comic style.
So what about even your cover work, or anytime you were doing coloring work? It's such a, and I remember I asked you this in our magazine interview. It felt very gouache,
Yeah.
watercolory, or maybe talk about your color theory a little bit, or how that translated into comics.
My color theory used to be I like to use all the colors, or it was I like colors that look like something to eat. Because if you look at those Sam and Mac covers, they kind of look like they're made of candy, or they like,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and sometimes my color theory when I'm painting in my office, people are horrified when they hear this. Sometimes I'll choose the color that's closest to me if I can. I don't want to bend down and get that color out of the tub under the. I don't know. I'll just make it out of these two colors that I can reach easy. But the the upside of that is you end up kind of using colors together, and it helps pull them together in a way, rather than using really disparate colors. So over time, I think my palettes have kind of matured a little bit, but I always liked stuff that looked very rich. When I was a kid, I loved Hanna-Barbera comic covers that, or Bugs Bunny or Disney things that were very solid. So all stuff that looked like you could pick it up and hold it in your hand. That was the stuff that spoke to me. Even though I grew up in a time when that kind of 70s style, where there'd be like a thin line and washy colors, was very prevalent, the stuff that would speak to me looked like something that was in the room with you, like it was solid.
Yeah. And at that moment where you started doing Sam and Max stuff in print, I think still to this day there's really nothing else like it, and I'm sure you've influenced a lot of cartoonists. Did you have any kind of static or any type of kind of like weird feedback from people when your stuff started hitting? Kind of like, what is this? You know what I'm saying?
Oh, like somebody that's upset because they don't get what it is, or
yeah.
I don't. If there was that, I think they kept it to themselves. I didn't get any sort of angry. Nobody took the time to tell me how much they despised my comics or how confused they were by them. But I always felt lucky that I had fans that were sensible and weren't insane. And they would always get the extra joke. Like there'd be some joke, nobody's ever going to get this joke, and I would put it in, and then somebody would write, "Oh, I love that joke," and that would always be very gratifying. So, what's the question again? It was, was anybody kind of put off by the?
Right.
I don't know. I think the strangeness of it. I have heard. I think in reviews, I think I did hear that the stuff was kind of aimless, or somebody was complaining that there wasn't enough of a plot. And for me, I would explain, there was always just enough of a plot to give the characters an excuse to say things to each other.
Right.
And even when I watch movies or, any kind of entertainment that I enjoy the most, I'm rarely concerned with plot. I'm always caught up in character moments more. My favorite movies, I'll end up just waiting for a certain character moment that I'm anticipating. If I'm watching Harold and Maude or something, here comes the part where this and that, and or here comes a certain line, and it's less about the mechanics of how the story moves
People won't leave the theater. People won't leave the theater going, "Man, that plot." No,
I think it's not like I don't admire people that can people that can pull off a brilliant plot. I think that's great, but it's just not been my strong suit, and something that I have not pursued so much. I think working for Pixar, I would end up, that becomes sort of the thrust of what you're doing. Is every day is looking for how the story moves forward while you're creating those hopefully compelling characters. But that takes more of a forefront when you're doing something for a huge audience. Where Sam and Max, I'm the audience, and if somebody else wants to come along, that's great.
Right. No, that says a lot. And even you showing us your childhood comics, your comedic timing is already there. You know what I mean? It's just kind of, you're just transferring it over to a different vessel. in the more printed stuff.
I mean, I wasn't. He was younger than me, and so I wasn't super young when I did this. I was probably in middle school or first year in high school when I did. When I was teasing him that way. So,
oh, there was a question.
I certainly wasn't a savant of humor.
Our first question, speaking about your brother, Tico from YouTube asks, does your brother still draw?
He had some jobs where he was drawing. He was doing more graphic design kind of stuff, and he would draw, and he'd do this kind of cool, like tiki style was something that he excelled in. But he sort of veered more towards music. That was his strength, and so he had drawing skills, but music was his superpower. So
very cool. Thanks, Steve.
It's funny. That's like my brother Dave, who also drew, and I think he would have been a funny cartoonist, but he went into music.
Oh, okay.
But he used to be in. We were also in sort of like into the same stuff as kids, as brothers are. Like, oh, here's a cool show, or I mean, you had less choice of what to watch, during that era. So
yeah,
and there's also that humor that comes between brothers that's different than other humor, because there's things like little language and little in-jokes that like you will have with your brother, or you might have with your cousin, or that's like within your family.
Yeah. I have an older brother, and he had a very dry sense of humor, and I feel like he was a big influence on what I thought was funny, because his humor was flat, dry as a bone. It's like one year, my younger brother, he put together a compilation of, it was called Family Comics, and he asked everybody in the family to do a little strip.
Wow.
And I think it was just 1 or 2 pages, and so we each did our own thing, and I can't remember what the one I did. My dad drew a character. My dad was in the airline business, and he did a character called Tom Bird. So he just drew this guy that looked like some 1940s little ballpoint pen sketch of this kind of pilot guy that looked like something that he would have loved when he was a kid. And my mom drew one. Like, none of them were artists. My mom drew one called Tilly the Tooth, and it was a lady with curly hair, and she had a giant tooth in the front. That was hilarious. And then my older brother, who I was just telling you about, he did one, I forget what he called it, but it was like 2 little kind of fuzzy things standing there. And one says, hello. And the other one says, hello. Would you like a Hawaiian punch? And the other one says, no, thank you. And that was the end.
Oh, the payoff. Wow, I love it. Pull the rug from under you. That's fantastic.
I like the name Tilly, so you know what era your mom was coming from.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tilly. Not too many Tillys in today's strips.
I don't hear it too much.
That's fantastic. And also, just one other thing about that is, I think a lot of people don't think about, as cartoonists, how much comedic timing, if you're doing humor or funny things, is kind of laid into the fabric of your art style too. So they kind of work hand in hand.
Oh yeah, I mean, that, I think sometimes I am thinking of animated moments when I'm drawing my stuff. There was one strip I did when I was doing the color strips for LucasArts, and it was a Sam and Max Western strip, and it was one of the few times when there was no dialogue in it until the end, and so it was almost like an animated storyboard of them coming into a bar and having a shootout in a bar, and it was all visual gags, and it was really fun to just see it through like that, because I always felt like Sam and Max were animatable, or they, were very rubbery and physical.
Did you go ahead, Mike?
There are gags that are in the comics that kind of play like, animation gags.
So this is one of the things I always find interesting now. Some people see their cartoon or whatever they're drawing almost like it's a movie in their head, and they're picking images out. Yeah. So does it play in your head like a cartoon or like a film, or are you thinking single, are you thinking more like the format of the comic?
As far as the format of the comic, I think there's something to the pacing where if you know you're saving a joke or something, you want to save it for the page turn, or you sort of want it to play out to the audience in the way that you're feeding it to them in a certain way. So you want it to be served up the way you want them to consume it, so you don't want them to read ahead, or you don't want them to read the conclusion of the gag before the setup. So I think there's that, yeah. And for me, I guess I do see the whole thing. I work in thumbnails first, and sometimes the thumbnails are just little snippets of dialogue, and the character is just standing there, and sometimes that'll grow into a bit of how the information is delivered, or turns into a little side gag. Just by having my hand drawing the characters helps me find something that I might not if I was just typing it on a computer.
So you're thinking visually, like you're drawing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, okay.
I mean, sometimes there are just lines of dialogue that just are floating around in my head, and I'll just write them down, and sometimes they'll find a home. Like a lot of the time, contriving the comic would be, how do I want to draw this, and this, and how do I get them into a story? And here's an old line of dialogue. I wonder if there's a place for that in here. So it's kind of like composing something with elements that are kicking around.
I have my eye on the chat. There's so much interesting stuff going on. It's distracting me.
You've
gone berserk in there.
Yeah. Do you think that also came out of working in animation or working like in Pixar, where you're working in story and you're always, you're going over it and trying to find ways of improving it, adding it, taking it out, chopping things up?
Yeah, I mean, Pixar came after the comics, so I was already thinking that way before I got to Pixar. And at Pixar, it's continuous iteration. You're always, it's like I would tell people, it's like a science experiment. You're trying to prove everything that it isn't before you discover what it is. Like, is it, well, let's chase this idea for a while, and then you find out that why that idea is not working, and well, it must be somewhere over here, and you're kind of hunting for something all the time, or looking for a better way to tell something, or a clearer way to tell something, and constantly testing it on yourself and on other people.
Well, before
my stuff, I just think it up and do it, and then I don't have to iterate that much.
Well, Steve, I want to talk a little bit about LucasArts and Lucas Games, and how all that came together. And also, your strips were, if I remember, they were horizontal, right? I remember
At first, the first one started was a little half page.
Yeah.
And then over time, I think they gave me a full page, so I would do like a Sunday style. I would call them Sunday Funny style strips. And it would always be a spoof of whatever game was releasing at the time. So the first time I did one, it was one of the Monkey Island games. So I did Sam and Max in a pirate motif. And then further along, there were, like, when they were doing their Star Wars games, I would do Sam and Max as Star Wars characters. But I wanted to make sure that I wasn't stepping on the Star Wars license, so I'd make it my own version of Star Wars, where there'd be like rubber tires on the TIE fighters and stuff like that, and uniforms, but it was obvious what it was. So,
right.
And those were super fun to do.
And dealing with those licenses, did you have on all the stuff with Lucas stuff anyway? Was there kind of people looking over your shoulder to make sure you weren't breaking any licensing?
It was actually remarkable how little anybody cared about what we were doing up there. And George's mandate to the company, he just didn't want them to lose money. Hey, look, there's Barbara. It was pretty hands-off making the games themselves. For my stuff, just doing a strip. There was no editor for my strip. If there was something contentious, I'm sure somebody would have come out of the woodwork, but there was never So you can't make that joke. That's a horrible joke. For the license. Like there was one actually where it was, I think it was a takeoff on Rebel Assault. Which one? No, was it Rebel Assault? There was one first-person shooter. Maybe Barbara can jump back in and tell us which one. But I did a strip where it was a spoof of this first-person shooter, and it was it was Sam and Max as rebel spies, and they were walking through the Death Star, and they're basically shooting everybody they see, and they're talking about what nobody will understand our peaceful purpose, and the stormtroopers are just trying to be pals. Hey, you guys want to go get lunch? And that came out of one time when I think I heard that there was a note that maybe that game was too violent, and they and so, but it was too late for them to change it. So that was my way of getting a little kind of inside gag in there that it was this violent first-person shooter.
Now, how did LucasArts happen for you? Was that something that all just kind of lined up?
Sorry.
Oh yeah, it was like Doom, but it was Star Wars characters.
Look at this lighting on my face. Maybe I could.
It's very moody. I like it. You need a nice cigar now.
I was working at Colossal Pictures, and they were a little studio in San Francisco that was doing commercials, and they were doing stuff for MTV, like Liquid Television and stuff like that. And I was doing like character designs and things. Mm-hmm. And when it came, I was there a couple of years, I think, and I got a couple of different calls, and one was from the production. I heard that there was a production doing Nightmare Before Christmas, which I didn't know what it was yet, and they were looking for storyboard artists. And then the other call was from Lucasfilm Games, it was called at the time. And so it's like, oh, which one of these things do I want to do, and or even interview for? And the idea of going to Skywalker Ranch and just being part of that world was very appealing. And I went up there and did an interview there, and just wanted to be at Skywalker Ranch. And I was not highly motivated to do game art, but I was thinking, oh, maybe this is something I should try. Maybe it's something that will, be worth doing. But I really want to be up in this world for a while and see what that's like. So I took that job and ended up working at Skywalker Ranch and creating on-screen art. But then because I was there and they found out I could paint, and so they would hire me to do the covers. So I did these covers that people somehow still care about.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that
one right behind me, if you can.
Yeah, somebody just asked what's that
back? A back cover image from Maniac Mansion from when they re-released it.
Yes,
it was hanging up in. They made a little model of the haunted house hallway, and so that hung in the.
That's so cool. Yeah. So I know there's a big gamer contingent that knows, your work from like Monkey Island and all the other kind of things. And how often do you find people who go like, wow, I didn't know you did comics. I mean? I knew you did this other thing.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm trying to think of somebody that knew the games that didn't know about the comics. And maybe I just haven't been aware of that, because if we're talking about the games, we're probably just talking about the games. I mean, we never get around to the comics.
So there you go.
I went down the rabbit hole today of looking up your RPG, your role-playing game work, your Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, yeah. Oh, God, help you.
Covers and so many, like the unexpected styles.
If I could do 2 of those a month, that would keep me going. I could pay my rent and feed myself, and I was painting monsters. So the warning is everything you ever do will exist forever on the internet. So try to do the best you can.
Man, that's true. That's fantastic. And how long were you at LucasArts? You were there for a while, right?
Yeah, I was at Skywalker Ranch. It seemed like it was a couple of years up there, but maybe it wasn't that long. And then we moved down to Kerner, which was down where ILM was, down in San Rafael. So we moved to a different building. It was heartbreaking to get kicked off the ranch because it was such an idyllic location to work in those back buildings with like bobcats walking by your window of your office and stuff like that, and down in the outskirts of San Rafael.
Mm-hmm.
But it seemed like it was a few years, and then I sort of, I'm trying to think of all of the different games, and I'm terrible at having like any memory of timelines.
Yeah.
So probably one of your commenters probably knows better than I do.
They probably have it all like tattooed on the back of their arm.
Mm-hmm.
But before we get off of LucasArts, and what's up, George Gant, a fantastic strip cartoonist, wanted to talk about Sam and Max Hit the Road.
Yeah.
No question, but I just wanted to say that receiving Sam and Max Hit the Road was one of my most cherished childhood memories.
Cool.
Can you talk about that game being published and how all that came to be?
Yeah, I mean, having the chance to do that game sort of justified my kind of spontaneous choice to go make game art, even though game art wasn't sort of on my radar at all.
Mm-hmm.
And because I was up there, I think I had a comic in progress when I was up there, and the characters were sort of in the atmosphere of the company, and I did little animated versions of them for the programmers to use when they're being trained. When they bring in new programmers, they do what they call wiring a room, where they'd have two characters and a little background, and the characters could say things so the programmers would get a chance to practice their skills. So
Mm-hmm.
Sam and Max were kind of like unofficial mascots in the company, and then that strip, came about because they were doing their fan newsletter, The Adventurer. And at some point they came to me and said, "Hey, do you want to do a strip for our newsletter?" And I said, "Not really, but I'll do Sam and Max." And so that was another thing that sort of reinforced that connection between Sam and Max and LucasArts. And then at some point, two of the project leads, Mike Stemley and Sean Clark, they needed a project to work on, and the head of the company, Kelly Flock at the time, pitched the idea of doing Sam and Max and licensing Sam and Max from me for a LucasArts game, which I was blown away by. That George Lucas's company is licensing something from me. How bizarre!
Right.
And you're working for them.
I was working for them already, and then then there's this other thing where they say, "Hey, we'd like to use your IP and make a game out of it. And we don't want animation rights. We don't care about toys. We just want to make this game."
Wow.
And so that, and then we ended up, I think we did it in less than a year. And, those guys, Mike and Sean, knew the characters very well. And so there was no sort of ramp up to them knowing how to do it. And I was around kind of overseeing in a lot of different areas. So I'd, do sketches for backgrounds and did some of the animations and Sam and Max's walk cycles and things like that. So just kind of trying to, make it feel as much like what the comic was. It was really the first time I ever collaborated on something that was Sam and Max, that, I wasn't going to be doing everything that, I was counting on other people to be able to.
What was that like to let go?
No, it was fine. It was fine because everybody proved that they knew what they were doing, and that, everybody they knew what the project was and how to bring their best game to it. Like I was talking about this recently in another interview about this animation. I don't know if you remember the animation of the carnival ride, the Cone of Tragedy.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe my contribution to that idea was, there's a ride called the Cone of Tragedy, because I think that's funny. And if it was a comic, I'd figure out what that was. But since an animator named Larry Ahern was working on that, it was up to him to figure out what the actual animation of the Cone of Tragedy was. And it was hilarious. It was just a cone. They walk up to it. These manacles come down and grab them and turn them upside down. And then the cone starts spinning. And then Larry had animated almost like a Swiss Army knife, like blades are coming out of it and stuff. And he said it was like those displays in the store where they have the, the knife with 50 attachments. And so that happens because it kind of sets the stage for this violent thing to happen. And then the thing's spinning around, they're being violently smashed against it. And then at the end, it kind of just deposits them on the floor. And then I think Sam's heart stops at that point. But that was all, comes from just trusting somebody else to have some great ideas to bring to the table.
That's beautiful.
Now, how much input did you have on the dialogue or writing of a video game script?
Yeah, I mean, I had a lot of influence on the story, and then Mike and Sean carried a lot of the day-to-day dialogue stuff. There were certain things that I would write or pipe in and give an impression of, but those guys carried the bulk of the dialogue for the game. And like I said, for me, it was like sort of trying to spread myself thinly over the whole thing. So, it had to do with story ideas or the locations, or we need the kind of cool roadside attractions that we all know from U.S. road trip lore.
How was it?
Mystery spots and stuff like that.
How was it having other people work in your style? Did you learn about your own work? Because when they make a game or they make a cartoon, then everybody's got to work on it, but it's got to look like you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So they have to analyze you, right? And then with every cartoonist who's drawing a strip, there's always what I call like the lumpy parts of your style that are unique to you. But if somebody is going to adopt, like I always think like the guys who animated was it Bill Melendez, those guys that did the Peanuts thing.
Right.
They had to learn how to draw like Charles Schultz, which is not easy.
Right. And you look at those cartoons, and they're certainly not exactly like his comic strip drawings. There's always some compromise that's going to come out of it. In the case of the Sam and Max game, I was sketching as much as I could early on before other people had to try to guess, how to draw my stuff. There are some people like Leela Dowling was on it, and she has a cartoony style that's not unlike, what I aspire to. So when she would create something on her own, I think she did the little cat on the street. There was like a little cat with a big head. And I don't even know if I drew that first. I think she probably invented that character. I think we probably knew we wanted this little kind of mangy looking cat, and she brought that to it. And I think I drew the Mole Man. I think there was certain things that I kind of took a hand in because I thought I knew what a Bigfoot looked like or something like that. So I would jump ahead and do my version of it. Then there'd be other things that we just trust somebody else to do, and they would do a great job.
So what about, and I have a little Sam and Max shrine in my in my studio, but I remember and the people in the chat can probably tell me if I'm wrong on this, but I remember there was 2 versions of Hit the Road. One didn't talk. I think
that's
wasn't
true.
Right.
There was a non-talkie version.
There was a non-talkie version. Was all text boxes, and then the next one, I can't recall if in the talkie versions that there was lip syncing, or they were just like and then
lip syncing. Yeah.
And then
it's just you just draw this. The programmers just they just run that as long as they need it for those lines.
So my question to you is, how was there a process, or were you involved in when they gave voices to the characters? Because that had to have been pretty, maybe a different movement.
Yeah,
for you
I remember
these guys talk, right?
Yeah, and I remember the discussion of it. And in my mind, like at that time, when I would think of Sam talking, I would think of Donald Sutherland, like Donald Sutherland, MASH era. And I think my note for Max, I think I was pitching Joe Pesci. Am I funny to you? Am I a clown to you? So I think that sort of was in the pocket of what we ended up with for the game. And then since we weren't going to get Donald Sutherland or any known actor, it was more about sending it out to different actors that might offer something that we weren't imagining.
Mm-hmm.
And the voice that kind of stood out was Bill Farmer, who's the official voice of Goofy for Disney.
Mm-hmm.
But something about the way he would do the voice. It's the way if I imitate Sam, I do Bill Farmer doing Sam. So sounds like a marginally volatile hostage situation, Max. So it's almost, people on the chat probably don't even know who Johnny Carson is, but it's like Johnny Carson mixed with Jack Webb from Dragnet. So it's all it's all business. It's kind of like, it's not quite like a Humphrey Bogart kind of thing, but it's got this flatness to it, or this.
It's in that wheelhouse, yeah.
That like pulpy, yeah.
Yeah, it's not overstated.
And to jump ahead just a little bit, so when the animated cartoons begin to happen, were you referencing the video game to kind of match the voices for Sam?
No, I think the reason, and I heard an interview with Bill Farmer, voice of Sam, recently, and he said he would have loved to have done the cartoon voice for the TV show, and nobody asked him to do it. And I think the reason was because it was a Canadian production. They were favoring Canadian actors for whatever their financing was or something. I don't think they were inclined to go to LA for their actors.
Yeah.
So, but that actor brought something different that I ended up liking. He was almost like what's his name, the actor from Addams Family.
John Astin. Right?
He had kind of a John Astin, like this kind of enthusiasm to him, which I sort of liked and hadn't heard it so much in Bill Farmer, but he kind of sold it in the show. I liked it, actually. And then the Max actor for the show, he did this thing that we didn't specify. It kind of came out as he was doing it, where he would like do other voices, almost like Robin Williams or something. He would like start doing like little takes on other. Your clothes, bring them to me. Like he'd just like do Arnold Schwarzenegger in the middle of a line.
That's awesome.
So they were their own thing, and I sort of thought that worked for the show. I didn't mind that it wasn't. It's like almost like the way I justify it is like, how many Batmans are there? How many James Bonds are there? They all have something about them that's totally different from the others, but there's some kind of root of the character that's hopefully always there.
So my next question is, now that your kind of career is going this way, and I'm sure that game unlocked something.
It's like one of those monitors in the hospital.
Well, the LucasArts fans, that's a really big gaming audience, and it's kind of like at the, I don't want to say the end because PC gaming is still a thing of, kind of the text adventures and the point and click adventures and all of that kind of stuff. What made you start to collect Sam and Max in strip form? Because Surfing the Highway came out somewhere, and
oh yeah.
And what was the impetus to collect all of your work into one thing?
Well, I never have any impetus. It's always somebody else's impetus that gets things going.
Fair
for
enough.
me. And an actual company had come to me, Marlowe and Company, and said, "Hey, we want to collect these comics in one book." And it was weird to, I'd worked with comic companies, but I hadn't worked with a book publisher before.
Yeah.
They actually had a publicist and stuff. They put me on a radio show in the Bay Area to talk about the book, which I was unheard of for a comic. But so they were the first ones that wanted to compile the comics in a book, and I thought that was great. They did a nice job of it. And the only reason we did it again, I think Telltale did the next version of it, and that was because just get it back in print so the people that are playing the games can read the comics, see where it came from, because people would ask. I mean, a lot of people that I meet would play the games and didn't realize there was a comic, and then they'd be excited when they found out there was a comic. So it's just an effort to try to get it in front of an audience, and just have it available. And since those are gone, it's like people say, "Oh, when are you going to bring that out again?" And there's part of me that's reticent to just bring the same thing out again. I almost want to wait till I have some more to put in it, or a new thing to go alongside of it, rather than just go back to the same well.
Right. That
I
makes
actually have this on. I brought it with me because you said it's good to hold things up.
Yeah, people like to see that.
And it's like the sunset is going down. But I had this story that I'd done like
there you go
30 years ago, and it was originally going to be a anthology. So it's going to be 3 issues. I think it was called The Sam and Max Show. And this is the story where Max gets shot in the ear and he goes to the hospital, and Sam has to replace him with another kind of animal. And so he interviews different partners, and he ends up with a white-handed gibbon as his partner. So these pages, this is as far as I got. And I had, it's actually, here's Max in the hospital.
Oh, wow.
That's my wife as his nurse. Sam comes. Don't hospitals always smell like thousands and thousands of old hand washings? Hello, Sam. Hey, guess what? They put a big yellow medical tube in my body. Would you like to see it?
How big are those pages?
They're regular standard. They're just a little wider just because they come out of a pad, but they're standard marble size. But I have this story, and it's like, oh, I should just close the books on this and finish this story. And
thanks for sharing that.
What kind of a weird experiment would that be to sort of go back to something you drew 30 years ago and see what the next page of that looks like? I mean, I know what the rest of the story is.
Yeah.
But what would it be? I look at the way it's inked and I go, oh, I wonder if I can ink like that anymore, because it looks pretty clean and precise.
Well, my question to you, Steve, would be: would you want to change any of the art from those pages to match your new stuff?
No, I don't think there's anything about the way I've drawn the characters that would change. I wonder if I would think some of the jokes are stale. I mean, like the first page of this is about them breaking into a drug lab. In the drug lab, they're making a drug called Croak, which is made out of frogs. So it's like basically a crack house. But like,
it's a croak house.
Yeah, it's a croak house. And so I wonder if some of the jokes would feel like they're sort of out of their time or something like that. I noticed there were a couple of jokes that are kind of referring to a channel that was in our neighborhood, that doesn't exist anymore and stuff. And it's kind of a weird time machine to go into and look at.
Are they in any specific time? Because it's sort of like, that's one of the things about cartoons that I always feel like when they update the Warner Brothers stuff and they try to bring them into modern time,
like give them cell phones and stuff like that.
Yeah, it never really works. Like if you give Popeye, if you take the pipe away and you give him a vape, I mean, there's just certain timeless things in the land of a cartoon that I think the audience accepts, but sometimes people who want to make the cartoons go like, well, no, we're doing the Flintstones. They can't have, a TV with the aerials or something,
Oh, right. Kids won't know what that is. I mean, Sam and Max live out of time. They're not in a specific time. If they're in a time, it's probably more of a retro time, just because, like, if there's a car in the background, I'd rather draw an old-fashioned car than draw a modern car. So somebody said they'd like to read that whole story, where the gist of the story is that Sam ends up with this white-handed gibbon as his partner. So we see how that plays out. And then somehow Max gets killed during the story, and because I think he has to go to the netherworld to battle the ghost of the white-handed gibbon. I think
I love that you're cracking yourself up. That's the best.
So I just remember there was a sequence where I was trying to figure out how the two characters are figuring out how they're going to kill Max. Like, should he just eat these bad clams? Should I back over him? Like, and I look at that stuff and I go, oh, I don't know if I'm mean enough to do this story anymore. I was kind of a mean guy when I was
That's so funny. The fan base knows how you think. That's great. Well, Steve, I don't want to run out of time because I want to stay honest to your deadline here. Can you tell us a little bit about how the cartoon happened? How did the animation deal come about?
Yeah, that there was an inquiry. There's a guy that worked for Nelvana Animation, or as they say in Canada, Nelvana. And he was a story editor there called Dan Smith, and he was a fan of the comics. Like all my opportunities have come from having a fan in a high place, like Kelly Flock at LucasArts, would read the comics to his daughter as bedtime stories, and so that's why I got to do a game with LucasArts. And so Dan Smith was interested in doing a show. He had worked on a ton of shows for Nelvana, and kind of put Sam and Max in front of them as something that for them to possibly license. And they did make a inquiry at one point, and it didn't happen. I ended up with I got an entertainment lawyer that turned out to be somebody that I couldn't work with, and so it all kind of went to the back burner for a while, and then it kind of resurfaced a few years later, and it was around the time I was leaving LucasArts, and so we made the deal to do the show, and I would work with Dan to work on the stories, and he had a bunch of writers he had worked with before, so they were in the writers pool to write the episodes, and I wrote a couple of episodes myself, and it was mostly supervising other people's stuff, and me and Dan would be on the phone for like 6 hours. I lived in a barn in West Marin, and we'd get giant packages of FedEx, bundles of model sheets for different episodes and stuff every week, and scripts, and we'd just be on the phone all the time. We'd go to Toronto to work with the artists at some points, and it was really fun to do. And supposedly the show did pretty well on Fox Kids, and around the time it was sort of in its first season, I think it was nearing the end of its first season, there was some sort of political intrigue at the network, and the lady that had greenlighted our show was swapped out with somebody else, and so our show.
What year was that? You remember?
I want to say 97, 98.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I know that time because I was working on Superman.
Yeah.
And there was a new lady who came in to Fox, and that new lady tried to do the lion thing. Like the new lion comes in and eats all the old lions.
Yeah.
And they did a lot of weird stuff to make shows that were successful, not as successful, but moving around in the schedule.
Oh right.
Yeah.
All kinds of really weird TV stuff that people don't have any idea.
Yeah, I mean, our stuff was on Saturday morning at first, and then it was on in the afternoons for a while. It actually did really well in the afternoons.
Right.
But I think whatever she was doing about you, she was swapped out for somebody else who wasn't into our stuff. So we were really waiting till the last minute to see if we were going to get another season. Because really, at the end of the first season, you're starting to feel like you understand what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And oh, okay, I get how to do this show now. So I think if we had another season, it would have been really fun to see that through and see where we could have taken it.
How I don't know, from dealing with and talking to a lot of people who've been in animation and kind of just knowing how the series can either stop on a dime or you may be working forever, like The Simpsons, right? It's just you just don't know. How much of a heartbreak is it when they're like, yeah, that's it, we're done?
I think there'd be more heartbreak if they owned it. I mean, I think Matt Groening, what he had going for him is they wanted to do his weekly strip, right?
Yeah.
Before The Simpsons. He invented The Simpsons so that he could sell it to somebody, so that he didn't have to give up the thing that he loved, which was his Life in Hell characters. So The Simpsons are basically those characters, right? Or some derivation off of them. And so because the company owns them, they can just go to town and do what they want and keep the show on, and, you know, they fund it and stuff. And so since it's corporate owned, they can make more out of it than something that's a franchise that they're licensing. At least when they were done with my stuff, I get it back, which is something I would always try to make sure would be the case in my contract.
So it wasn't a
Somebody's
buyout.
not gonna. No, if somebody's going to make something out of it, then when they're done, I want to get it back.
Right, you get that.
It's remarkable that you've owned it all this time. It's fantastic.
Yeah. That's
So
usually
I've always admired, like, I always admired the Gumby franchise, because it was like in the family, and they just do these weird shows, and it always had the, you know, the taste of the creator in it, no matter what, and it just stayed the same. I think it only has recently been released out into the corporate world where other studios are going to take it on, but I always like the idea of keeping something in the family if you could.
Yeah.
Plus there's people that have tattoos of Sam and Max, so I can't possibly sell it out, or they'll have regret that now Sam and Max are in the Ice Capades and they have a tattoo of.
they have to go either have it lasered off or have something else lasered off so they can add the ice rink.
They'll have to make Max into Stitch.
So now I want to cover your Pixar time, but I'm also being honest about how much time we have. Can you maybe talk a little bit about Telltale and kind of reinvigorating the video game?
Yeah, there was. I mean, they came around because, you know, you might know there was at some point LucasArts came back and they said, "Hey, we want to make Sam and Max again," and they actually started making a new Sam and Max adventure game. And Mike Stemley was the one of the original, you know, leads from Hit the Road. He was leading it, and so I was, you know, collaborating with him, and it was almost like a serialized idea of a story, and it was really fun. But at some point, LucasArts canceled it, and so we had to wait out their contract to expire before Telltale could do something, because some of the people that had come off of that canceled project and other canceled LucasArts things went off to start Telltale, which was a company that was going to sort of refresh the idea of story games. So once the license ran out from LucasArts, I was able to work with Telltale, and what was really fun about what they were doing, since it was serialized, like for about, you know, if there was like 5 or 6 episodes for all those months, there'd be a new episode coming out. Like if you do one game, like Hit the Road, it comes out, and then like a couple months later, it's kind of like in the ether. It's not forefront. But with these serialized games, there's a chapter happening every month, and they were really good at having stuff going on in between and little shorts sometimes. And there's just they had a really strong, you know, fan community that was supported on their forums and stuff. So I thought they did a nice job of sort of building a community out of all that. And I thought that was good for Sam and Max. And I always felt like shorter episodes are a good thing for Sam and Max. So we did 3 what we called seasons at the time.
I love it.
And so they've just recently released the 3rd season with sort of updated lighting and updated sound and updated music and voice performances and stuff. So
that's
so it lives on.
It will always live on in our hearts, and I love that I keep seeing new things. I'm really excited about that. I'm really behind on the Telltale stuff, but I love what I'm seeing.
Yeah, if you do a search for the Sam and Max, The Devil's Playhouse, that was the 3rd season, and that was their sort of most critically acclaimed season, because they went for the swung for the fence and did some nutty, cool stuff in it.
So,
and there's been toys, and there's stuffed animals and action figures and stuff like that. So
yeah, the action figures are really cool. And are you still producing them? I know that the Baby Commando Squad is coming out.
The Rubber Pants Commandos.
Rubber Pants Commandos,
that came out, and then Andrew Franks, the head of the company, he likes scuba diving things, so he wanted to do Scuba Diving Max, which was based on a drawing of Max in a paper doll spread in one of the comics.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's down to the all the fine detail of that drawing, where it's like there's even a bite out of his scuba diving suit. But so that was a fun one. And then there's an octopus with it, which I decided was Ratso the octopus from one of the comic stories. He saves the day in the road trip story.
The designs are really good. They're really strong figures.
They were really good at making them tangible. A little hammer was lovingly sculpted and stuff. Telephone.
I have the first two. I haven't gotten any of the other ones. All right, Steve, before we run out of time, you gotta touch on Pixar. Because somebody will be mad if we don't talk about Pixar. Whatever you want to tell us about your time at Pixar.
That's a great question. Yeah. What do you want to tell us about Pixar? Well, we left out a whole section of ILM, which is led to Pixar. I was working at ILM and working on a Frankenstein movie that was in story, which got canceled, and then they kept a bunch of us on to do feature development. So I did a bunch of feature development where we just make up ideas for movies at ILM for a while. And then when that closed, I got a call from Joe Ranft at Pixar, and they were looking for artists to come over and be story artists. And so I came over and did an interview, and I brought a really crappy portfolio I had all these storyboard drawings, but they're all out of order. It was basically just a table full of, random drawings. And then I had character designs because I had been doing that at feature development. And I said, I do this too. And he goes, no, we don't need that. We just need storyboards. And so they hired me as a storyboard artist. I worked on Cars and ended up doing some script writing for the first one. And from that, the second thing I worked on there was a fairy tale called Brave, which took place in Scotland. And I went into that as head of story, which meant kind of help develop the story. And over time became the screenwriter for it and ultimately a co-director on it. And so that went on for a long time. That went on for like 6.5 years. So that was like a big chunk of my career for quite a while.
Wow.
But it had a great research trip at the beginning of it, and I got to meet a bunch of cool actors and got to meet Reese Witherspoon, who was the original Merida before Kelly MacDonald took the role over. And then that led to Toy Story That Time Forgot, which was a TV special, the Toy Story characters, which was a lot of fun. I got to write and direct that and be a character in it. And a few other things along the way. And then the last thing I worked on was a streaming show that we did during the pandemic called Cars on the Road, which they basically said, we want little shorts and we want them funny. And so I decided to send McQueen and Mater on a road trip. And the way it kind of plays to me is almost like Sam and Max shorts with the Cars characters. So there's like a haunted hotel one. There's like a dinosaur park one done in Ray Harryhausen style.
Oh, very cool.
And, there's like a stunt circus one, and a horror movie being made one, and all these different goofy ideas.
I love it. All right, Steve, before you get out of here, I would feel really crappy if we didn't touch on the 1,000 questions that are in the chat.
Yeah.
So, Conley, do you want to try to do like a super lightning round? And Steve, what's going to happen here is that Conley is going to try to throw some questions at you, try to answer them as quickly as you can.
Okay. A Lightning McQueen round. I've never seen. It's been a while since we had this many starred questions in here. We're there's no way we're getting through all of them. So
hit the top ones.
Yeah, we try to have a narrative, try to weave these together. I think we're just gonna start at the top and see how many we can get through. Our Anthony Tang on the YouTube asks, are you going to bring back Sam and Max Freelance Police with more seasons?
With more seasons of game, or are you talking about a show? I'd love to do a show. I'm not in any talks to do a show, but I think there'd be a life for a Sam and Max show in the future. And if somebody wanted to do a game, I'm always happy to talk about anything anybody wants to do.
That's awesome. Great. Thanks for the question, Anthony. We've got Connor Pittman. Steve, do you have any advice for inking? There's so much light in your inking work.
Oh, thanks. For me, I would ink with a crow quill first, and that's a lot of, you have to be careful you're not putting your hand in it. And ultimately, like a lot of inkers, I moved over to a fine felt marker. And for me, I end up drawing the line. I actually draw the thickness of the line and then fill it in, which is kind of cheating. But I think people like Art Adams do that as well. And what's the advice? I'm not sure. I guess I guess the more you know about what the drawing is before you start inking it, the better. So the more you've figured out before you start inking, unless you're super confident, figure out your drawing first.
Thanks for the question, Connor. Are those old strips archived somewhere?
What you mean, the old strips that go before the published strips? That stuff's not. I don't really include it in. I didn't include it in the books just because there's kind of, it's not like my finest work. So maybe there's a place for it someday, but I'm not worried about having it archived right now. Maybe there'd be a history book that has more Sam and Max sort of backstory in it. As far as the comic strip, the collection, there's none in print right now, but I'd love to do it again.
How about this? We talked about the inking. What about what was used for coloring?
So the last pens I used were kind of a ballpoint marker. Those were and I noticed a lot of people use, I think it's the Higma that is favored by a lot of inkers, and I have done a little bit with that, but not too much. As far as coloring, if I'm painting a strip, like I did for the Sunday strips for LucasArts, those were watercolor or just thin acrylic. So that's pretty much what I use. Same thing I would use to do a painting.
David Peterson comes in from YouTube.
David Peterson, hey man, miss you at San Diego.
With Steve's experience with adventure games, was he ever tempted to move away from pure humor and do something pure pulp adventure?
I do have a couple of ideas that are sort of like that, and I haven't seen them through, but I always like having some humor. So I think no matter what I did would have some humor in it. But what you're talking about is something someday, if when I see you in person again, I'll tell you about one of the ideas.
Thanks for the question, David. A lot of these are touched on the same thing.
No pressure.
Well, how about this? We've talked about the traditional artwork. Do you prefer making traditional art or digital art?
I think I prefer traditional. I've used digital in my work just because, for storyboarding, it would be a lot quicker. I use digital to do indications. If I'm trying to figure out a color palette, sometimes it's a time saver instead of doing a whole watercolor painting before I do a painting. Like right now, I'm doing a Hero Initiative piece, and I did the sketch in Procreate. So
that's great.
So, but I like having something to hold in my hand after. So here's my little sketch for my Procreate for my.
Oh wow, that's very cool.
So this is a painting that's happening in my studio right now.
Oh, so those like your color study?
Yeah, so I can try some different things, and I'd like to instead of purple, maybe that should be something else.
Is there a process for transferring that to a board, or is that just?
I just did a simple grid on it, and then I ended up gridding it onto instead of doing a transfer paper, I just did a grid, and that way I can end up I'm drawing it again, so it's more fresh when I'm drawing the final one.
That's great.
Very cool.
Maybe get 2 more in here. We have a bunch left. I'm sorry, everybody. We're not going to be able to get to them all. But any plans for a re-release of the TV show?
Yeah, I don't think that's in release right now, but I think they should do. I think they should maybe do a higher res one or something. But I haven't, asked them about it. It seemed like at the time they released that show, they were into it. So maybe if there was something that would motivate them, they'd get riled up about it again.
Jamar, if there's anyone in here that you think we could touch on, I feel like we're not gonna. Oh, some of these are like gonna open up. Hey, can we go back to the beginning of time?
All right, I got it. Here we go. You ready?
Ready.
James, what up? James says, "Who would you want to help you change a tire, Sam or Matt?"
Well, Sam is the practical one, and Max is the living id who, I feel like both of them are me. Like when I would send the pages to Lois to letters, she'd say, "This sounds like you talking to yourself." So Sam's the one that he's the one that actually has a conscience and could get something done, where Max doesn't even care. So Sam's probably better for the tire, and he knows what a tire is.
All right, I don't know. This is a speed round. This is going to be a challenging one. I think this is this is a great one to end it on. Do you have any rules for writing Sam and Max dialogue? There's something so distinctive about it that I've never quite seen anywhere else from Lumilise on YouTube.
I think people can connect to Sam and Max because they feel like they understand it in that way. Like there's something about the way they proclaim things to each other, and Sam is sort of the observational one, and Max is the one that punches the holes in any kind of sensibility. They're just two sides of a coin, and I think people understand that when they read it and feel like they can do it. And I think sometimes that's the gift of a certain kind of franchise where people want to make their own version of it. There's a lot of fan stuff that has to do with Sam and Max, and you see people making pretty valiant and pretty close approximations of how they talk to each other.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Emily.
Good job, both of the Steves.
Great question.
Good job, we did it. Steve, we're going to get you out of here because I promised I'd get you out of here on time. You were a fantastic guest. I hope in my heart of hearts that you entertain coming back one of these days.
We'll do the rest of the questions that day.
Yeah. We'll put all these in our pocket. But you were a fantastic guest, and I know you have to go. But do you have anything you want to leave our viewers with before you go out of here?
The fans have been the ones that have kept Sam and Max going when I was busy with other stuff. I mean, I had the luxury of getting to go off and work for cool companies that had nothing to do with Sam and Max, and there was always something sort of burbling along with them, and I feel that is owed to the fans that keep them alive. So my appreciation goes out to all the fans of Sam and Max for being normal in spite of your love for Sam and Max and for your support over the years.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Steve, and thank you, everybody. We're going to call it. Steve, I don't know if you've seen some of our old shows, but we have a sign out before we head out of here.
Oh.
And for the love of the King, Jack Kirby's birthday, we're going to say goodnight and thank you to our guest, Steve Purcell. And don't forget to wash those Kirby hands. Let's see your Kirby hands, Steve. What about?
I think it was his 107th birthday.
107th.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
Yeah.
Right. Happy birthday to the King.
Here's to 107 more.
All right. Thanks, Steve. Guys, have a great night. We'll see you next week.